The man who provoked war against our neighbors in Kenya was promoted to full 4-star general and now to CDF. And as CDF, what has he done? He has provoked war against a section of people in DRC, saying the whites will attack them. Sudan, he has already attacked. He promised to overrun Kenya in 2 weeks. But
to behead some people?
To behead Dr. Besigye, who is on trial. To behead Kabobi, as he calls him. You tell citizens that, had it not been for my father, I would have killed you. Now for you, Dr. Besigye, whether my father is here or not, we are going to behead you, and even set a deadline. Now that is the discipline in the army that people are talking about. And you know what he told them? This buffoon, this fool, should use his small legs to run very fast before I get him. And you know, that one is okay because it is the man's son.
Okay.
And that is the discipline in the army.
Thank you.
So that is what we have to celebrate. I will not join them. With regard to celebrations, I think the NRM people have reason to celebrate. You know, people don't celebrate achievements only. Some people celebrate failures. Some people celebrate the existence. As to whether the existence has been meaningful is a different matter. I understand that the government of Idi Amin would also celebrate the day they took over power. But depending on your perspective and where you're looking at things at from, people may celebrate while others are cursing. Now you can see they're telling you that the 9 years of Idi Amin were wasted years for the country. But Idi Amin and his group were celebrating. During Obote too, there were celebrations, I think, mostly in Bushenyi, where Obote II's government was celebrating the return of Obote. So NRM has reason to celebrate because it is a deal that went good for them. They may celebrate, not necessarily for us, in our name, by us, but for they can celebrate. Some of these people liberated their families. You cannot say they should not celebrate. Some of these people are celebrating their jobs. They have too. Quite frankly, you give it to him. I think my brother Joel Museveni has established, as Lydia called it, and I was marking the word, a semblance of security across the country. Now, while he's celebrating that semblance, you go back to those other presidents that were there before, and I think everybody has spoken about the attrition rate for presidents in this country. How were they living? You had Sir Edward Mutesa, he was removed by the gun, by Milton Obote. You had Milton Obote one, he was removed by the gun. Actually, even Museveni was working with Obote when Amin threw them out in 1971. Then Amin comes and he's removed by the gun in 1979. Then you have those unstable governments of Professor Lule and Bina Issa QC, all removed by the military men. Then you bring back Obote too. No, actually there was another transitional, chaired by Palu Mwanga, deputized by Museveni. Again, it was short-lived. Then they said, okay, we have organized an election. That was highly contested. Actually, on the face of it, the reason why Museveni went to the bush, I know he would have gone to the bush either way, because his plan was not to get power by the ballot. He knew he would not get it, but by the barrel of the gun. So he removed Obote's, actually he removed Tito Okello Lutwa by the gun. Lutwa had removed Obote by the gun. Then Museveni comes in. You give it to him that he has invested heavily in security. Whether this is personal security or the country's security, and as a country we are collateral, is a different matter. So, but also, you're talking about NRM's contribution. You forget the rest of us. Probably the country is stable because during our years, youthful years, we have not picked guns to destabilize him. There have been those that have destabilized him or attempted to destabilize him. Maybe the reason he succeeded is because we did not join them. But there are also those that have been stated to have been created by him. We hear people like things like PRA, is it?
People's Redemption
Army and so on and so forth. People tell us that, you know, when you go back to surround it, you find it was created from within. Some people who wanted to mint money, etc. But that said, and having said that, yes, you give it to him, there are pockets of instability, state-inspired murders. They are there. They may not be at the same volume of the previous governments because his is a stable government. Stable because there is nobody in the bush. Previously, there were people in the bush. They were fighting, and in the process of fighting him, I mean, Museveni was fighting, and in the process of fighting him, there was exchange of fire, and exchange of necessity would create deaths. Now, with regard to other things like social services, I think Chris talked about them, etc. And you know, you compare incomparables. You cannot compare a government that is not at war with one which was at war. The population was, yes, much smaller, GDP much smaller, but even the expenditure was much smaller. Today, you have to spend because you have a big population, but also collecting huge amounts of taxes. Also look at the debt burden at the time and today. So you might think that this man has made tarmac. Lydia is talking about tarmac from Koboko to Kisoro and Tumbale, etc. Of course, without taking into account the kilometers within those tarmacs, which are bad marams or potholes. I mean, somebody at some point was saying we have very little tarmac in our potholes. Okay, so all those ones exist. Now, talking about the British or colonial government, yes, did they owe us a duty in the first place? No. What did they come here to do? To enrich themselves. But can you still be talking about the commissions and omissions of the colonial government 60 years after? What have we been able to register as countrymen? And of the 60 years, you have 39 under one person's rule. Genome 7, 39 years. As you rightly mentioned, 39 plus 15. I mean, the rest, I mean, 62 minus 15, the rest is his. Under his rule, you're talking about, Chris was talking about social services. Lately, I have been seeing something flying on social media. A tukutuku ambulance attributed to the Honorable Chris Bariomus. And I said, really, why are you harassing this man? For heaven's sake, it was even a big contribution that the minister could give an ambulance.
It was a contribution from Rotary.
Actually, it was not even donated by him, but by Rotary. The Minister
Through my office as
of Information, the Minister of Information has an ambulance in his constituency. I don't know whether, I think lately you have some few kilometers of tarmac in your constituency. Previously, there is none.
You have not been to the countryside. You are just a Kampala. You are a topsoil.
Countryside does not mean your constituency. No. Or when I last went there. And this ambulance had a bed inside without a mattress. It is a remarkable achievement for the NRM to have a tuk-tuk ambulance without a mattress, with a bed, and somebody was placed there. The other day, Chris himself was sick, and there was, I don't know whether it was a joke or not, that they put him in a health center 3, and because of his size, he could not fit in that health center. They were saying that the minister, given his size, could not fit, and they even gave us a picture. Parts of his body were outside the clinic.
That's the work of comedians. Like you.
I don't know. He had to be flown to Kampala. Just imagine if it had been another person who cannot be airlifted.
You should not just pick small anecdotes. Somebody says, I felt an Ewero in Kanungu simply because my family organized the helicopter, therefore that is used to measure the status of health services. That's being simplistic. There are ways in which you measure whether the healthcare services are improving or not, whether Ugandans are accessing education or not. For instance, let's look at the education sector. When NRM came, we had only Makerere University in Uganda, and to get to university was like a miracle. But today, almost every sub-region, those independence districts, Chigezi, Toro, Lango, West Nile, there is a university.
We lost a Minister of Health, Dr. Stephen Malinga. He died in Dabani Health Center, I think 3 or 4. When I heard Dabani, I had not known Dabani. I actually thought he had died from Durban, South Africa. He was a great friend of mine. So when they brought the body, they told us the story that in that health center, the Minister of Health could not access basic medical service. Now, that is an achievement of the NRM government. Education, if you have been on social media lately, I think there is a campaign by young people in this country to show us schools in the different parts of the country. There are those which are still roofed with, grass thatched. I saw a hospital in, where does Honorable Kuyokin come from? In Izombo. In Zombo, a hospital, district hospital, which was grass thatched. There are hospitals and schools in this country which are still roofed with asbestos. Okay? Now, the fundamental change you are talking about, even from a political perspective, and this is where I agree with Genome 7. In 1966, and actually 67, Milton Obote's government surrounded Parliament with Yame to influence how members of Parliament vote on the 1967 Constitution. Genome 7's government does not do such things. It brings the soldiers in Parliament to force Parliament to change the Constitution so that he can qualify to stand for the next election. He can bring money to Parliament for members of Parliament to vote and remove term limits so that he can qualify for election. What is the point here? As you go to celebrate, do an introspection and see what you have done for and to Ugandans. You talk about Vyame, I think was it Honorable Babu who talked about nepotism, etc. You know, the soldiers who did this were promoted. The man who killed people in Kasubi after torching the royal tombs was promoted.
But if you ask me, in other words, not what Museveni said, but what I think have been Museveni's greatest achievements, I can say 3 great achievements of Museveni in the last 39 years. When Museveni came to power, Uganda was actually a collapsed state. The ability of the state to monopolize the exercise of violence was limited. This Kampala, I don't know how many of you were old enough to be in Kampala. You see that side of Mengo was controlled by the NRA. In the center of Kampala, it was the UNLA. But in the side of Muyanga there, it was Kaira's group, UFM. Then in Nkwanga and Fedemo, they controlled some other part. Then Moses Ali and his group controlled another. There are different armed factions controlling different parts of Kampala. So to move from, for example, to Luzira to Natete, you would go through 5 administrations. So what was Museveni's greatest contribution to Uganda? First, I would say stabilization of the political dispensation. It was not obvious at that time that you could stabilize Uganda. So what Museveni did is he not only defeated all contenders, all armed groups that were contending for power, and he used both carrots and sticks. He defeated them on the battlefield, and after defeating them on the battlefield, he would then bring them into the fold and negotiate with them, integrate their soldiers into the NRA, later UPDF, and their political leaders into government. So he was able to win both militarily and but exercise sufficient political brilliance to ensure that their political laws accommodated. In that sense, he was able to stabilize Uganda, which was not obvious at the time. Remember that Uganda, Museveni has fought, I think, 22 or 25 rebel groups in different parts of the country and defeated all of them by both political accommodation and military victory. So that is one. The second thing I think Museveni achieved was to put Uganda's economy on the, what I would call the rails of long-term growth. Because when Museveni took over power in 1986, I told you last time, Uganda's GDP, at the time of the exchange rate fixed by the government was $4.9 billion, 4.9 billion. But if you adjust to actual GDP at market prices, it was about 2.1 billion. If you adjust at 2.1 billion of 1986 to 2024 figures, it comes to about 4.5 billion or $4.1 billion. I need to remember the details. So, 39 years ago, Uganda's GDP was 4.1 billion and Uganda's population was 16 million. 39 years later, Uganda's GDP is 58 billion and the population is 46 million. So the economy has grown by leaps and bounds. And that is because Museveni, when I say he put the economy on the rails of long-term growth, he did the three things which I think were fundamental to alter Uganda's economic trajectory. One, he ensured macroeconomic stability by always ensuring that you don't have runaway inflation that we are suffering from. The second thing is established institutions like the central bank and the Ministry of Finance. They are now losing their independence and their competence, but they became very strong pillars of economic management. So he established economic institutions, and three, he established political stability, which is the foundation of also economic growth and investment. The third thing, which I think was Museveni's greatest achievement, is he tamed the army. The army in Uganda had run out of control. None of you guys were born at the time. Maybe Francis here was there. You could reach a roadblock, you could be killed anytime, you could be looted officially by the army at roadblocks. There was so much chaos, terror, and brigandage by them. The army had run amok. Today, you can walk on the streets, meet the general of the UPDF, and he disturbs you in a bar, you punch his nose, and walk back home knowing that he cannot pull a gun at you. So, the taming of the army, the stabilization of the political dispensation, and putting the economy on the rails of growth over the long term. You see, if you look at over the last 40 years, Uganda has maybe the 11th fastest growing economy in the entire world.
Okay.
And this is even a remarkable achievement for Museveni because at the time Uganda begins her growth journey, Kenya had started stagnating. Tanzania was still stagnating. Congo was falling apart. Sudan wasn't functioning. Rwanda was part of that time under civil war. So it's, you know, growth is also a kind of ecosystem whereby my growth gives you what we call positive spillovers. So, but Uganda grew at a point where all its neighbors were in chaos. And therefore it was not enjoying positive spillovers. In fact, it was getting negative spillovers. Also, it enjoyed the growth when significant parts of the country were under civil war. So, those are what I would consider Museveni's greatest achievements over the last 39 years. Now, I should tell you that the economic reconstruction of Uganda also came with very, very high costs. And now...
And let's come back to that one.